Okay, so we're now at our the final section of verses. Depending on how it goes, we'll for sure cover verse 53, 54. Maybe we'll hit on verse 55, and then this evening 56. So these three verses, 53, 54, 55, they're the last of the prayers that end with this Govindam refrain. These final three are dealing with, well, 53 and 54 certainly go together. It's karma and becoming free from karma. 53 is all living entities, from the topmost to the most insignificant, and everything in between is receiving its deserve, its karma, by the Supreme Lord Govinda. Of course, he's doing these things through the agency of his representations. And then 54 is becoming free from that. Becoming free from the influence of karma by Krishna's intervention, by the power of bhakti. And the last verse is a very amazing verse, but we'll see if we get there. So let us begin chanting together verse 53. Hitā pataga, the meanest insect. Hitā pataga. So, oops. Hello. Hello. Oh, there we go. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda. Help. It's not moving. Can you release it so it moves? By whose conferred power, hello, it's not moving. Hello. Help. Krishna. Oh, controller of technology. Okay, there we go. Now it's not working again. Okay. By whose conferred power, because Govinda's power, are maintained the manifested potencies that are found to exist of all virtue, all vices, the Vedas, the penances, and all jivas, from Brahma to the meanest insect. Here's a summary of the message of this verse. There are potencies which elevate living entities, degrade living entities. So within some activity that's sinful, there's a potency to degrade that living entity to a lower condition. Within activities that are virtuous, there are potencies invested in those activities that elevate the living entity to a better condition. Those potencies are not, so we're not the controller. Someone was sharing it, a teenager was sharing this with me the other day. You know, one thing is we have control of our lives. Well, we don't. We have choices, free will choices we can make, but within the range of those free will choices, there's already predetermined potencies in those that elevate and those that degrade. So we may choose, I want elevation, but select from the menu of those that degrade and will become degraded. So the potencies are there, and the potencies come from the Supreme Lord. That's the message of this verse. In his purport, not a long purport, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur focuses on Varnashram Dharma, because within the verse is the word Dharma, and he's indicating that Dharma means, in this case, Varnashram Dharma. So we'll be spending a little bit of time in this very substantial topic of Varnashram Dharma. Here's some comments of Bhaktisiddhanta about virtue and vice. So in different parts of the world, and different cultures, and different modes of nature even, different people consider different things to be virtuous or to be vice. He writes in his purport, by dharma, parentheses, virtue, is meant the allotted functions of varna and ashram. So a virtuous person means, by definition, they're acknowledging their particular psychophysical nature, and under the codes of the Vedas, they're following them. And that's the life of virtue. There are things that a grahastha does that a sannyasi is not to do, and vice versa. If I went out and got a job to get some money, you know, that's not, it would raise eyebrows. It's not the duty of a sannyasi. And if a householder didn't have some occupation to take care of their family responsibility, saying, you know, ke sara sara, then that's not proper either. So there are virtuous activities to be followed according to our position. We need to know what our position is. We need to know what those activities are. And there's potencies within those activities, when properly followed, that lead to elevation or degradation. Rupa Goswami is quoted, or excuse me, Lord Chaitanya is speaking to Rupa Goswami on the same topic. Veda nishedha papa kade dharma nahi gane. An important point. In this age of Kali, men may profess a religion, but they actually do not follow the principles. Instead, they commit all kinds of sin. So taking that statement, Srila Prabhupada would massage it, or regularly remind people who are following this religion or that religion, particularly when the audience was from a Christian background, he would remind them to follow what their religion says. Could you close the door behind you? Thank you. Prabhupada said that's an American disease or a Western disease. But I can see it's not just an American or Western disease. when you enter the door, you close the door. We don't. Anyway. I bet there could be like a little device put on the door that does it for you. And then you don't have to even think, just closes the door for you. Maybe somebody will get an idea to do that someday. So, I remember hearing Prabhupada in a room conversation speaking about, he was I believe in England, and he had just previously been in Sweden, and he was describing what had happened in a hall in Sweden. The devotees had arranged for him to speak in a large hall. And after the program, a young man came forward, right up to where Prabhupada's seat was, and said, Swamiji, I liked very much what you were speaking. I am a Christian. And Prabhupada, without blinking, hesitating, said, no, you are not. Prabhupada said, I had never met the young man before, but very boldly I said, no, you are not. And the young man, Prabhupada said, was taken aback. And he said, well, Swamiji, why do you say that? He said, let me ask you some questions. Sure. You say you believe in Christ. Yes? Yes, I believe in Christ. I'm a Christian. And Christ says, thou shalt not kill. Yes? Yes, Christ said, thou shalt not kill. It's a commandment in the Old Testament, but Christ said, thou shalt not kill. So, are you eating meat? Yes, Swamiji, I eat meat. Therefore, I say you are not a Christian. And the boy said, well, why do you say I'm not a Christian? Because I eat meat. Because the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. He was like, you know, head-on confrontational. I mean, I'm sure there was, Super Soul was prompting the pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, to speak in that circumstance in a particular way. It's not like a standard that we should imitate in our own little way. But Prabhupada spoke like that. And, you know, he gave some of the explanations that people give. Well, Swamiji, you know, Christians can eat meat. Said, that is not Christian. Because Christian means you follow what Christ said. And Christ said, thou shalt not kill. And, well, I don't kill, someone else kills. I only buy what's the product of the killing. Anyway. So this is a statement. It's in the name of virtue, or following the codes of Dharma, one's religious duty. Persons do all kinds of things. All kinds of things. That's just one amongst all kinds of things. So virtue means there's prescribed duties for us, and according to our position, we follow them. On a regular basis, Prabhupada would speak about human life beginning with varnashram. So what does that mean? The converse is, without varnashram, one is still in animal life. Prabhupada would call it dvipada pashu, an animal that has 2 legs. Most animals we think of have 4. But human may be standing erect on 2 legs, but if one isn't following these codes of Dharma given by God, their life is like an animal. And what is the difference? Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, doing it this way, doing it that way without reference to the codes of Dharma is animal life. So human life begins with doing these activities according to the codes of Dharma. I make reference here to the perfectional stage of Dharma, and that's Bhagavat Dharma. according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, where one is engaged in the activities of devotional service, starting with hearing and chanting as we're doing, and that's paradharma. It's the essence, or the perfectional stage of dharma. Here's a nice quote on this, directly on this topic, from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he describes the Vedas, and for that matter, any genuine religious scripture incorporates two types of vidhis or rules and regulations enjoined in the scriptures. The first is primary, or mukhya, and the other gauna, or secondary. The primary purpose of genuine religion is to teach love of God. Secondarily, because men have a strong desire for sense gratification and are not prepared to devote themselves fully to God, Scripture provides injunctions and prohibitions whereby men can fulfill their conditional desires while still advancing towards the primary goal of loving God. Now there's many, many references that say the second one without the first one is not what dharma is, or it's, in the language of the Bhagavatam, it's a waste of time. Shrama eva hi kevalam. Pretty strong language. So the essence must be there, the primary, not just the secondary. If you recall from Vyasa's despondency after compiling all the Vedas, using this very same terminology, he was emphasizing the secondary ones, but not the primary ones. So he was feeling dissatisfied. And anyone who would follow the secondary ones and not the primary ones, at least on the soul platform, one would feel dissatisfied. Because the soul's satisfaction is loving exchange with the Supreme Soul, through devotion, through bhakti, through loving service and giving and receiving in a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the loving satisfaction. We all want to love and be loved, without exception, universally. We all want to love and be loved. And elevate that to its pure state and its love of God. And then with that love of God can be love of another living entity, whether it's a family member or outside the family, or universal love and brotherhood is dependent upon love of the Supreme Person. These are our teachings that we've received from, and here it's specific in the explanation given by our acharyas on this verse, actually. To fulfill one's desires outside of Vedic injunctions is called vikkarma, or sinful work. It is understood that one may have various perverted desires, those which are separate from God's interests, but so long as one satisfies them within Vedic guidelines, he will gradually be purified. So this is the verse, vice and virtue. So these secondary ones are ones that have elevation, degradation, potency. That which take one's up, those which take one down. And those potencies, up and down potencies, the verse is telling us, come from Govinda. Then, just a little emphasis on this word, tapangshi. Tapangsi is penances. It's found directly in verse 53. Two things. Real penance, in its real sense of the term penance, is something that's found specifically within Varna and Ashram. Like Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita purport, every ashram has its particular sacrifice, its austerity. So for the brahmachari, it's the sacrifice of the hearing process. That's what brahmacharis do. They sacrifice the hearing process. They don't go listening to other things. They listen to the message of Scripture. And for the householder, the sacrifice is giving charity. So I'm receiving wealth through my activities, let me give in charity. That's a householder's austerity. And then separately, vanaprastha, sannyas. These penances or austerities, they're prescribed according to the Vedic system. And this other quote here is Bhakti Siddhanta indicates this tapangsi or penance is all regular practices that are learned with the view of the attainment of the proper function of the self. So we just, for example, we just observed the month of Kartik, and many devotees observe some kind of Kartik vrata. So, for example, one of the common Kartik vratas in ISKCON is during the Kartik month, every evening we sing the prayers to Lord Damodar. And while singing the prayers to Lord Damodar, we offer a lamp or a candle, a light to Lord Damodar, bringing our mind to Him, bringing our devotion to Him, offering various prayers to Him in glorification of Him, and awakening our devotion to the Supreme Lord. So that's a very appropriate, very nice vrata or penance. So the purpose of such a penance is, as Bhakti Siddhanta is saying, with the view of attaining the proper function of the soul. What's the proper function of the soul? It's engaging in service to the Supreme Soul. What does the part do? Naturally, the part serves the whole. Very simple. So the part and parcel living entity serves the Supreme Living Entity. That's our proper and natural function. And when so doing, we feel complete. We feel whole, we feel sheltered, we feel connected, we feel happy. And minus that, no matter what we do, the happiness isn't going to be there. No matter what we do. Happiness is not found through disconnected from the supreme activity. That's Maya. The nature of Maya. According to the Bhagavatam's definition, the nature of Maya is, very simple definition, seeing things as existing and having value separate from their source of emanation, Krishna. That's Maya. Real simple definition. So we can choose. Living a life of austerity, it's cold, it's wintertime. And there's parts of America that's colder than Seattle. I'm going to one of them in a couple of days. It's really cold. So there's austerity. Now, what to do? We'll serve Krishna in that place that's cold, or the place that's hot, or the place that's this, or the place that's that. So when one does like that, that's the higher order of penance. You get the idea? And other than that, there's these secondary ones, and we should observe those secondary ones also, but in pursuance of the higher one. The verse, back to just the theme of the verse, we're hearing in the verse about varieties of life, higher and lower positions. And within Srimad Bhagavatam, in several places, but one of them is Canto 2, Chapter 10, there's a list of the living conditions or the statuses according to karma of the living beings, the various species of life. So here's the list. 8,400,000 species, and it starts with aquatics coming out of the water. 400,000, excuse me, yeah. This is, it should have been changed. What happened? Anyway, we'll go to number 2 because it starts aquatics, 900,000. Then trees and plants in the evolutionary scale is next, 2 million. Then insects, 1.1 million. Birds, 1 million. 303 million animals. Far fewer humans. But that's a big variety, 400,000 human beings. And don't ask me the question, could you list some of those different varieties of 400,000 living beings? That's a question you can't ask. And according to consciousness, these are these up and down statuses, especially in relation to the human form, we can accrue new karma or burn old karma. It determines going up or going down. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Mormons, fastest growing religion in the world, they accept the principle of reincarnation. Did you know that? They accept the principle of reincarnation. And they have this idea, there's only one direction. You can only go up. Which is very puzzling because, I've had conversation where, what if someone does something sinful? Like, really, really sinful. They're going to go up, right? Name some sinful person, take your pick, and that person's going to go up. And the answer is, yeah. Well, anyway. The picture of this verse and the Vedic version is up or down, and that the potencies are invested in those activities according to then when consciousness gets a reaction of good or bad, and consciousness then becomes elevated or degraded or more covered. And according to the position of consciousness, one gets a form of life. And that development of consciousness is, according to what Bhaktisiddhanta is explaining here, there's intelligence that's greater or lesser, along with consciousness greater and lesser, and that's supplied by the personality of Godhead. In other words, here's an example Prabhupada gave. The cat is in the kitchen, and the housewife is also in the kitchen, and the cat sees some milk on the table, and the cat waits for the housewife to leave the kitchen. Then she jumps up on the table and starts drinking the milk. Now, where did that intelligence come from? From Supersoul. So whether in an animal or human, there's intelligence. Here's another one, the thief. He has this desire to steal. So where does the intelligence to steal come from? Supersoul. So he goes around at night, and in the shadows of darkness, he's sneaking up on the place that he wants to steal from. And then he stops because Supersoul prompts him and says, "Look out, someone's coming." So he's hiding until someone passes. "Okay, now you can go. Go steal." So where's that intelligence come from? Supersoul. The bird that flies south in the winter, and the salmon that swim upstream to do their spawning and all that. Where's the intelligence come from to do that? A scientist will tell you, well, it's just wired into their genes. That's how it happens. Well, okay, what wired it into their genes? And even if they have the genes, anyway, intelligence is required. Intelligence comes from Supersoul, according to Guna and Karma. Higher and lower. Now, the higher is, the highest, not just the higher, but the highest is the Bhagavatam's message, and we're going to hear in the next verse that higher position. But this is the highest position, is not just dharma, but paradharma, or para, it means transcendental, or supreme occupation of the living being. And that's what we're seeing here, this supreme occupation of the living being. few nice quotes from the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's Shukadeva Goswami speaking Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit. We discussed a little bit before the Gajendra Moksha Leela. Here's something that Shukadeva Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit. Oh, up there. Shukadeva Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit about Gajendra before he was the elephant. He was a king. So he says to Maharaj Parikshit, after Agastya Muni had cursed King Indradumna, the Muni left that place along with his disciples. Since the king, well, this is, I'm ahead of myself. This is the next verse. Since the, okay, excuse me, this is the next verse. The fire, this is how, this is, the next verse is how this business of ordinary activity can be changed to higher activity, to transcendental activity. It's the process of hearing, and even in dealing, that's the mukhya, the primary. Then there's these secondary things, you know, how we deal with everyday affairs of life. This is on the left is a painting of the gambling match, playing dice between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And over to the left, poor Draupadi. She's, in the painting, she's painted in the complexion black, just like Krishna, because she was. In fact, when she came out of the fire that was to produce Drishtadumna, she was a bonus. The king wanted a son, Drupad wanted a son who could kill Drona. Anyway, long story. Mahabharata stories are always involved. So a yajna was performed whereby a son could come right out of the fire, and right after the son came Draupadi. And her complexion was like Krishna's. So she was then, another name of Draupadi is Krishna, because of her color was blackish. But extremely, extremely, extremely beautiful, as was Krishna, all attractive Krishna. So Dushasana has a hold of her sari and is ready to disrobe her in front of the gambling match. So on the one hand, the engagement of competition for a Kshatriya is within their scope of Dharma. But Dharma, those scope of Dharma things, should be done in such a way with the purpose of, as we heard Bhaktisiddhanta say, it's for the purpose of realization of the self, the purpose of the self. That means pleasing Krishna. So gambling Draupadi in a game is pleasing to Krishna? What do you think? No way. So even if you're the Pandavas, you do something that's not pleasing to Krishna, you're going to have a problema. They had a big problem. And over on the right-hand side is a yogi, and he's like, whew, boy, austerity, look at this man. And he's doing his astral projection program to direct the soul to some higher and other destination. But when those activities, any activity is done without paradharma in mind, or the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in mind, it's not going to lead to a good result. And that takes us to the good result verse. That's verse 54. Let us chant that together.
Govinda Vari Bhusha Tamam Bajai Govinda Vari Bhusha Tamam Bajai.
Does anybody know what an Indra Gopa insect is? A small red insect called Indra Gopa. You ever seen one of those? Lord Brahma apparently knew about what an Indra Gopa germ was because he made all species of life. So from the lowest Indra Gopam up to Indra, the meanest small red insect like the previous one, who was normally getting his karma, one can become sva karma, one's own karma can be changed by bhakti bhajam, by the process of devotional service. The translation reads, I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion. Krishna swallowing the forest fire. Lord Vishnu and Garuda saving a living entity, and devotees in kirtan. And impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities, of all those who walk in the path of work in accordance with their chain of their previous performed works. No less in the case of the tiny insect that bears the name Indragopa than in that of Indra, king of the Devas. So, a summary of what this verse 53 is saying, contrasting the potencies mentioned in text 53, the up and down potencies within karma, whereby Govinda gives the just deserved to all precisely according to their work and quality. This verse expresses the enigmatic distinction. Enigmatic means puzzling. This puzzling distinction. He who is impartial, treating all souls equally, extends special mercy to his devotees by uprooting their karma tendencies. Fortunate for us, Krishna does that. Bhaktisiddhanta writes, being free from all desires, save that of serving Krishna, Krishna has fully destroyed the karma, its desires, and all nescience of those devotees. It is a great wonder that Krishna, being impartial, is fully partial to his devotees. It is a great puzzle. And some people complain about it, not just find it puzzling. But it's his nature. It's discussed briefly in Bhagavad Gita. It's actually quite natural. It's not, on the one hand, it looks like partiality, but it's not. That is to say, someone approaches Krishna in some inimical attitude. Krishna, you're my enemy, like Kamsa. So what does Krishna do? He doesn't go, oh yeah, well, I'll show you, I'll smack. That's not Krishna. He says, oh, you would like me to be your enemy? Okay, I'll serve as your enemy. And someone approaches him as his loving master. And Krishna says, oh, you'd like me to be your loving master? Very well, I'll be your loving master. Etc. which leads into the next verse also, that he reciprocates with everyone's desire. But here, it's before that is the implication in karma. You know, largely we're selfish beings. We want to enjoy without suffering. We want the kingdom of God without God. We're selfish. I want. We're little, like children. We're just, grow up and we're still children. Children are attention machines. Anyone that's a mother or a father or even a sannyasi has noticed. Children are little attention machines. They got to be like attention, 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 and non-stop attention. Yes? They grow up and, they're a little bit independent, but they still want attention. Just like you're not so dependent on mom and dad for that attention. They have to find other ways to get it, but they want attention. Selfish, and we're self-centered. This is ego. As we discussed, the first element that's produced when the living entities in time are injected by the glance of Mahavishnu into material energy, the modes of nature start to become aroused, and the first element that separates out is false ego. Before we even get started, there's false ego. And then you just pile stuff on top of false ego. It's like, underneath everything else is false ego. And false ego doesn't just mean like, a macho guy that walks around with big biceps and thinks I'm Mr. Tough. That's not just false ego. It's anybody that thinks I'm the center. Because we're not. But think about it. How else are we going to conceive of experiencing what we experience except we're at the center? Well, Krishna consciousness is Krishna's at the center. Although we have consciousness, he's the supreme consciousness. That's Krishna consciousness. I'm perceiving, but he's at the center. I've deferred my selfishness to him out of love. It's a big step, really big one. So we can generally do it in little steps. Maybe 5% for Krishna and 95% for me. And we start negotiating. And gradually, maybe a little more, and gradually, in proportion to our accepting the wholesome position that my existence is for the pleasure of Krishna, not the other way around. A religious person often will approach God with their prayers for, I want this, that, and the other thing. My dear Lord, you have a really big warehouse, and I have a big list. And I've come to you. These are my priorities, but I'll take, I'll take whatever's on the list, please. And sometimes you really elevate some to like a really high position, and he's supposed to take care of it. And if he doesn't take care of it, there's something wrong with him. I'm speaking a little bit in exaggeration, but not so much. So the idea here is accepting this quote here, all desires are slackened in the process of devotion. They take this, like we heard Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur say, they're secondary behind the primary. And if we can just manage that one, these are secondary. And if I feel this need for fill in the blank, let me do this thing which I feel the need for because it's my conditioned nature. I need to dance, or I need to sing, or I need to something. Then let me fulfill that in pursuance of the primary. This verse is going to be further expanded in the final 5 verses of Brahma Samhita, which we did last year. So It's a principle of moving from the conditioned to the liberated state by the influence of bhakti, where self-centeredness is replaced with Krishna-centeredness. And when Krishna sees us moving in that direction, it's not just our effort that does it, it's Krishna's mercy that does it. He reciprocates and strengthens and empowers our effort. It is a great wonder that Krishna, being impartial, is fully partial to his devotees. It's a short purport where Bhaktisiddhanta, in one place, he summarizes verse 52. The karma is meted out perfectly, fairly, and justly for all living entities, whatever their position is, high or low. However, he writes, out of his great mercy to his devotees, he purges out, by the fire of ordeal, the roots of all karma, namely nescience and evil desires. So the previous is the good and evil, vice and virtue. He purges out the evil, the vice. This born of ignorance, the root cause of suffering. I've heard it so many times in Prabhupada's lectures. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. So we ignore Krishna. That's the real ignorance. We just ignore him. Like even when we're chanting, we're calling his name, and our attention is somewhere else. It's like, you call a friend, hey, come on over, let's spend some time together. Sure, what's a good time? 3 o'clock, okay, I'll see you at 3 o'clock. And the person comes to your home, you've called them, they come to your home, you just ignore them. That's rude. Or you're having the conversation with them and you're doing your email and, you're like, anyway, there's so many examples of that. It's impersonal, it's rude, it's offensive. Being inattentive while chanting is the root of all offenses. So when we're chanting, where should your attention go? When you're with a person, be with the person, be present with them. You may say, your friend comes, I'm really, really, really busy right now. Can we reschedule? Sure. Or, it's an emergency, please put aside whatever you're doing. Okay, I'll put it aside, because then you're present with them. But how can we not do that with Krishna? So presence with Krishna means, through devotion, all of those other lower nature things or lower modes of nature things and bad karma things and all of those kinds of tendencies that are nescient and worse, even evil, they're taken away. It really makes sense. You come in contact with the Supreme Pure. You become pure. So, here's a couple of examples of this fire of ordeal. Nobody likes ordeal. But we like purification. So sometimes purification comes with ordeal. Sometimes it's like really gentle, really smooth, very nice. And purification, that's one kind of purification. But it's not always like that. And Krishna doesn't make a promise, I'll purify you very gently. What if you're very attached, and how can Krishna purify you very gently? It can be ordeal, and it's not just like because you're bad, there's ordeal. There's this wonderful passage from Lord Brahma's prayers to Krishna. We've seen this picture before. Here's another version of the same, where in his prayers after stealing the calves and the cowherd boys, and he has the experience what he experiences, he realizes, uh-oh, I made a big offense to Krishna. And because of that big offense, I'm going to get a big reaction. Uh-oh. But how he processes that is this wonderful verse. It's quoted twice in Bhagavad Gita and quoted often by devotees who are extending devotee care to other devotees, because devotees go through this fire of ordeal, so we quote it a lot. Tate nukampam susamikshama. My dear Lord, Brahma says to Krishna, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, and all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, and offering you obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. Then I'm going to read a couple of passages because this is right on topic, and I think it's easy to listen to. It's easy to listen to because it's somebody else that's suffering and not ours. When it's our suffering, it's woo! It's hard to listen. So think about it either in terms of how to address your own condition of suffering when it happens, the fire of ordeal that is meant to purge from the very root nescience and evil tendency. Or you're in the situation where you have to be a friend to somebody who's going through some ordeal. So to understand this message better, here's a nice passage where that's what I was starting to read. King Indradyumna, great king, had gone to a forest after his mature stage. His son was old enough to become the successor king. He went to the forest to just engage in austerities and fix his mind upon the Supreme Lord without any other distraction. Except a distraction came in the form of, while he was meditating, Agastya Muni came, along with his disciples, to the hermitage, and was expecting, oh, this is the place where King Indradyumna is staying. He'll receive us nicely, I'm sure. But King Indradyumna said nothing because he was in meditation. And Agastya Muni cursed him. You have the mentality of an animal. You curse, you become an animal. You become an elephant. And angry, Agastya Muni left, along with his disciples. Since the king was a devotee, he accepted Agastya Muni's curse as welcome, because it was the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although in his next life he got the body of an elephant, because of devotional service he remembered how to worship and offer prayers to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada's purport. You can look it up later if you like, 8, 4, 11, and 12. This is the unique position of a devotee. Although the king was cursed, he welcomed the curse because a devotee is always aware that nothing can happen without the desire of the Supreme Lord. Although the king was not at fault, Agastya Muni cursed him. And when this happened, the king considered it to be due to his past misdeeds. Tate nukampam susamikshama is quoted. This one that's up on the screen. This is a practical example of how a devotee thinks. He regards any reversals in life as blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, instead of being agitated by such reverses, he continues his activities of devotional service. And Krishna takes care of him and enables him to be promoted to the spiritual world, back to Godhead. If a devotee has to suffer the reactions of his past misdeeds, the Supreme Lord arranges for him to be given only a token of these reactions. And very soon, he is freed from all the reactions of material contamination. One should therefore adhere to devotional service, and the Lord himself will very soon see to one's promotion to the spiritual world. Final sentence. A devotee should not be disturbed by unfortunate circumstances, but he must continue his regular program, depending on the Lord for everything. It's a classic topic in devotee circles, again, because Bhaktisiddhanta is indicating each of us, ordeals are part of what happens in our lives. So here's another example shown on the screen. This is, in the background, is a craft, an aircraft, pretty unique. It's a celestial heavenly vimana, where King Chitraketu had become a perfected soul and was coming to visit his friend. That's how elevated he was. He wasn't just a worshipper of Lord Shiva, he was his friend. That's up there. And as he was coming to see his friend, as the painting shows, he saw Lord Shiva sitting underneath a banyan tree with Parvati on his lap. And we know that Lord Shiva is not agitated by such things. It's a whole other circumstance for a worldly person and for Lord Shiva to be in that circumstance. So Chitraketu made a comment appreciating how dhira, how undisturbed in mind was Lord Shiva. But Parvati misunderstood. Parvati thought, he's criticizing Lord Shiva. How dare he? So when the vimana came to the ground and Chitraketu came before Lord Shiva to offer his respects to his friend, Parvati stood up and gave him one of these, saying, "You've offended Lord Shiva. You have no idea what kind of a personality he is. You're thinking he's ordinary like you. This mentality is very offensive. It's demoniac. I curse you to become a demon." And after she vented her hot temper, King Chitraketu didn't respond at all. He, in a very neutral way, folded his palms before Parvati, said, my dear mother, the words that I spoke were actually in praise of Lord Shiva. His uniqueness is known to me. Somehow you have misunderstood my intention, but this is a plan of the Lord somehow. So be it. I accept your curse. And he circumambulated her 3 times, got back on his vimana and went away. Doesn't say how long it took, but he then became a demon. And after he had left, Parvati received the same thing from Lord Shiva that she had given to King Chitraketu. Shame on you, Parvati. You have spoken of him as an offender, but it is you who are the offender. He is of the consciousness of one who is fixed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You've misunderstood his intention and you've cursed him. But just to show you what is the elevated state of his consciousness. For him, whether you had said, "You shall be liberated," or "You shall go to heaven," or "You shall go to hell," for him, he's neutral towards those. Svarga apavarga narakeshu apitulyarta darshanam. Why? Because he's fixed in the personality of Godhead. So this is the message that this verse is sharing. One who comes to that bhakti position, this is the most elevated standard of bhakti, and where up to the root, all considerations of one's previous and even present circumstances, previous karma, previous attraction, repulsion for sense objects, and considering this enjoyable, that is displeasurable, it's gone for such a person. And then one last thing, and I think we're done for today. Similar message as what we're hearing in this King Chitraketu pastime is a description in the beginning of the 6th canto. It's a long narration. I'll make it short. That is, Maharaj Parikshit, beginning of 6th canto, having heard about the structure of the universe, Vedic cosmology, in the 5th canto, he hears about the middle planetary systems. We discussed that a bit. He hears about the higher planetary systems, the heavenly region and above. And then he hears about the lower planetary systems, the hellish planets. Having heard of those descriptions, especially of the hellish planets, Maharaj Parikshit is very sad to hear how unfortunate people have to undergo those kinds of sufferings for their misdeeds. What can be done to mitigate, to relieve them of suffering simply due to their sins, just as we heard Bhaktisiddhanta say. In reply, Shukadeva Goswami describes different means, counteracting by prayaschita, or by means of atonement. He describes the process of knowledge, so karmakanda procedures, jnanakanda procedures, both fruitive activities and higher knowledge. Finally, he comes to this position, very important verse, where the position of devotional service, even if it's not in full consciousness of the Supreme, if it's just a shadow of that position of devotional service, it has the power, just as this verse is saying, this 53 verse, it has the power to take from the root tendencies for improper activity. The tendencies for improper activity is nescience. And the seeds from previous sinful activities that are still there. Bhakti Abhas, which means the shadow of devotion, or Namabhas, which means the shadow of the holy name, has that power. So that's what this verse is advocating, Lord Brahma. To move from the position of karma and trying to neutralize karma, move to the position of karma-free life. No longer bound by previous activities or the influence of our forgetfulness. Who can say how long we've been in forgetfulness of the Supreme? Answer, incalculably long. So many lifetimes, we can't even count them. And here we are, in this very fortunate position. And it's a blessing. Count your blessings and cultivate that good fortune into the house of bhakti, or the realm of transcendence. That's what's being advocated. One last point is, it's just an appreciation, mainly, in Jiva Goswami's writings, again from his Sandarbhas. This one is Priti Sandarbha. Priti means love. The teachings from the Bhagavatam about loving devotion. He points to, he's illustrating higher stages of bhakti, and points to one of the prayers of Queen Kunti. That prayer that many people know, where she's requesting in prayer to Krishna, who's standing before her, to, I welcome calamities, most people, when they go before God, please take the calamity away. Kunti's a little different. She's on another level of consciousness altogether. She's welcoming the calamities that come. Why? She's not a masochist. She's understanding when there's calamity, we, the Pandavas and I, feel intensified necessity of taking shelter of you, and you come because of that shelter-taking spirit. So, what's more important? Getting rid of calamities or your association? I'll take the calamities, because I'd rather have your association. In the circumstances, Krishna is about to leave. He came to help the Pandavas, and now they've regained their kingdom, religiously secured kingdom. Now it's theirs. So the problem is gone. Krishna's leaving. Bring the problem. It's not like, it's an intense kind of love. So Jiva Goswami says, this is a very elevated stage. We don't imitate praying to Krishna for calamities, but we should appreciate the elevated position of Kunti, that it's in this spontaneous love for Krishna position, where as far as looking at calamities, no problem. Same as the King Chitraketu. No problem. What's the problem is if there was some disconnect from the Supreme. Let me stay always connected with the Supreme. And so for us, we're not on Queen Kunti's platform, we're not on the spontaneous love platform, we're on the practice platform. So our prayer can be, let us stay always connected with the association of those who are carrying bhakti in their heart. Let us stay always with the practices that are the natural practices of one who feels love for Krishna or wants to awaken that dormant love for Krishna. Let me have that, let me stay always with that association and those activities, eager to hear the messages of Krishna. He concludes in this section, the Pandavas have no material suffering. If from separation, because Krishna is going to leave, if from separation they are in misery, which is sanchari bhav, due to their feeling of lack of mercy and lack of seeing Him, it is for nourishing bhakti rasa, impelled by that sanchari bhav. Anyway, that's just a little extra appreciation. Higher levels of devotion still may have their, the calamities or obstacles of life. They come. Prahlad Maharaj met them, the Pandavas met them, devotees of the Lord may meet them. We may meet them. We're not exalted. If they come, there's a way to view them that leads upwards, not downwards. It leads to ultimate purification and shelter in Krishna. So we'll end there. Any comments or questions on this section? Yeah. Microphone? Here comes the microphone. Thank you.
There is one question online, Maharaj, from Sridhar Prabhu. He asks, if a person gets elevated to spiritual planets, can he live there eternally, or he can also fall down again to the earthly planet?
He can live there eternally. If Krishna so desires, one can go anywhere and serve Krishna, but that's the exception. Generally, he'll serve Krishna in that spiritual realm. Anything else? Yes, in the back. You got to be fast, Sachi. Is there a second one? Second mic?
Hare Krishna Maharaj ji.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharajji. Could you elaborate more on virtue in reference to grahasthas?
In reference to grahasthas?
Yeah.
Well, the general given by Bhakti Siddhanta, the general is according to one's nature, psychophysical nature, there are things that are prescribed for one. So, I mentioned one of them. One of them is charity. Fidelity. One takes vows of marriage in grahastha life, and one fulfills those vows in grahastha life. One isn't prepared to fulfill vows, don't take vows. Fulfill them. I mean, there's circumstances where some exception can be made, but that's, again, according to Scripture. The exception is the exception, and even the exception is guided by Scripture. For grahastha Vaishnavas, we serve the deity and we regulate our lives around the deity, and we engage in giving the message of Krishna to others according to our position, that which is suitable to our position. We try to extend care to other grahasthas, especially within a community. Those that are passing through some difficulty, or those just need some support and care and concern. We extend ourselves in those ways. And those are all natural functions for a grahastha. You can say even their duties. And one who lives their life that way, it's virtuous. I was just hearing a description of Anasuya recently, the wife of Atri Muni. And time and again, whenever her circumstances of life brought about, I'd say, a visitor to Atri's hermitage, there she was with a big smile. Is there some service, whatever it is that I can do? It was like a blank check, just fill it in. And grahastha Vaishnavas, similarly. Receiving guests in one's home is a very important grahastha virtue. According to Scripture, one should receive a guest in one's home, including an unexpected guest, as Narayan. As if, who knows, maybe it's Narayan coming to my home. So one receives that person in that way, with kind words and so forth and so on. Of course, the person has a gun in their hand that you may do something else, but there's culture involved in observing those items of culture for grahastha. I would suggest Bhaktivinoda Thakur, from reading his writings, having been a householder with 10 children, he understood the distinction and the duties of a householder very well. So he explicitly, commonly, he would say, these are duties for a sannyasi, these are duties for a householder. So I invite you, read his writings from time to time, and you'll find a lot of very rich practical instructions. Yes, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So, why did Yudhishthira go to the gambling match?
Why did
Yudhishthira go to the gambling match? I mean, he didn't have to, and one of the regulative principles is that you're not supposed to gamble, right?
Well, take the microphone. If you were to gamble, that would be a no-no. Okay, I mean, I can't even imagine you gambling anyways, but if you were to, that would be wrong. One of the 4 regular principles not to do. But if you were a Kshatriya in Vedic times, then meeting a challenge of any kind Kshatriya doesn't say no. Kshatriya says yes. Competition, you know, a challenge. I challenge you in this activity. He likes, and it's his duty. So part of the contemplation of Yudhishthira was, it's a challenge, how can I, and you know, the response from others was, well, this is Shukuni, and he's a sneak. It's not going to be fair, whatever it is. Don't do it. It's cheating. Don't say yes to cheating. So he, being the virtuous king, stood on principle of, well, I've been given a challenge, so I should accept the challenge. That's the external. Then there's an internal. What's the internal? What does that mean? It means Krishna's in his heart. Yudhishthira would never do anything other than Krishna's indication. So Krishna, from within his heart, wanted to perform a leela, and Yudhishthira was assisting him. So that, you know, for many things, the Pandavas could give their association to persons other than in Hastinapur by being in exile, and so many things that were part of Krishna's leela. So, like the internal is like Arjuna becoming bewildered, Yudhishthira said yes, induced by Krishna from within. You know, how can he gamble Draupadi? Even when Draupadi brought it up to the learned assembly, no one could say, is what Yudhishthira did virtue or not? No one could say, except Vidura. He said very plainly. Okay? Yes, in the front.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I have a little comment, rather appreciation for Lord Krishna from morning sessions. So you have given a list of qualifications to become Brahma. So one of them says, if it is a great devotee, he can become a Brahma. But that's not surprising to me. But then two other things what you have said is like a greatest speculator or a philosopher who wants to become impersonalist, and still Lord Krishna can give him the very exalted position in this universe as a Brahma. That one thing. And the second thing is, you said about Veda Drishtya. If one has a tendency to try oneself independently or try to become more powerful.
Well, they think of Drishtya means they see that way. They have the consciousness of equal.
Equal. So but still Lord Krishna is so merciful, like giving that soul the position, the most elevated position in the universe as a Brahma. So
I'm sure he would have taken a devotee if there was a choice of two.
I'm seeing, I mean, Lord is so compassionate, even.
Yes, I'm just adding. So it helps us understand, like Prabhupada, he was practical. He wanted to spread Krishna consciousness. So he sometimes entrusted persons, we could say less than fully qualified, with very important service. Because he had work to do. And then some of those persons entrusted with service make some big mistakes. And the big mistakes made big problem. And some people were damaged because of those big mistakes. And different things happened because of that. But that was a risk. The circumstances for Prabhupada was, he was very elderly, he had no idea how long he was going to live, although Krishna gave him longer duration, he said. But it's like, it's emergency. Here's somebody who can grab a bucket, throw the bucket into the fire. Didn't say, what's your qualification? Do you know how to throw buckets? Here's the bucket, throw the bucket. So we, present generation, should be more careful. But yeah, Prabhupada was very merciful. Krishna was not, he wasn't in an emergency situation for him. But, if you're going to have a universe, you've got to have a Brahma. No universe without the one who puts it together. He's very merciful. And one can be sure with that came protection. Anything on the ladies' side? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is that correct? If karma is gone, if we end karma, then we can fulfill every desire?
Well, not exactly. Almost. Because desires are often, at least the ones that we're used to, are separate from Krishna desires. So when karma is dissolved, then separate from Krishna desires are dissolved. So it's not that when karma is gone, then separate from Krishna desires can be fulfilled, because they're gone.
Okay.
So in relation to Krishna desires, everything can be fulfilled.
All right. And is that possible during this lifetime?
Oh, yes.
Like even
no
with
hesitation.
Even
yes.
with the body?
Yes. No hesitation.
Okay.
Isn't that good news?
That's a good news. I have another question.
And how is that possible? How is that achieved? By strengthening bhakti. You know the meaning now, bhakti. Our desire to be in service to Krishna with love. And this, as that grows in strength, the other is finished. All desires will be fulfilled in relation to that one desire. Okay?
Another question is, I may hear this wrong, but you said something about even though sometimes we are selfish, and that is Krishna's consciousness, it's not our consciousness. Did you say something about?
I did say something about selfishness, but I'm not sure what your question is. What I was saying in general is, presently we're self-centered. We see and experience life with ourselves at the center. Look around the room and I'm at the center. And every one of us is similarly thinking, I'm at the center, I'm at the center. They have so many centers. And Krishna consciousness is, Krishna is at the center. So in that wonderful realm of Goloka, he's at the center of everyone's consciousness. So between this living entity and that living entity and that living entity, there's complete harmony. No friction. There's differences, there's variety, there's personality, there's individuality, but it's complete harmony because Krishna's at the center. And everything's being conducted by his internal potency that is to enrich and enhance the happiness of Krishna, and we're all participating together in that. I've got my part, you've got your part, they've got their part, and it's completely harmonious with Krishna at the center. So that's Krishna consciousness, and we let go of our selfish consciousness to get Krishna consciousness. Is that?
Yes, thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Okay, online questions?
There are a few questions, Maharaj. First one is from Ashok Prabhu. He asks, what vows should a devotee take during marriage?
What vow should a devotee take in marriage? That's the question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Well, whatever the vows are, what's in the book about marriage vows. Those are the vows that one should take. Maybe you can ask a question differently if he wants to, but that's, we receive things in a descending fashion. So whatever that comes in a descending fashion, that gives us the indication of how we should proceed with whatever. the activity is, including marriage.
Next question is from Kasturi Manjari Mataji. She asks, is it that a devotee starts to see everything as Krishna's mercy in light of Tatte Nukampam verse when one reaches a particular stage of Bhakti Nishtha?
And when we reach a particular stage of Bhakti
Nishtha.
Nishtha. A qualified yes. And the qualified yes is misuse of free will, and all of what flows from misuse of free will is not the fullness of Krishna's mercy. So, somebody does something awful. Oh, Krishna's mercy. Or here's another one. Prabhupada, somebody, there was a festival and they did something really stupid and something went really wrong, and so they were like reviewing after the festival and they said there's something that went really wrong, and one devotee said, Krishna's mercy. Prabhupada blasted him. Said, don't blame your nonsense on Krishna. That's not Krishna's mercy. It's your nonsense. So, a qualified yes. The merciful nature of Krishna is he may sanction something that's not in the interest of the living entity or other living entities, what to speak of his. He may sanction that. That in itself is not, the picture of or essence of his mercy, but the correction that may come as a reaction or the consequence of that misdeed, that's his mercy. Okay.
Next question is from Virajita Singh Mataji. She asks, along with your instructions to pray for connection to association and devotional activities, is it okay to set goal for advancing to the Dhira stage? How might we set goals in consultation with superiors?
What comes to mind is a lecture in Los Angeles that I heard Prabhupada speaking long ago. In fact, it's the topmost yoga series of devotees reading from the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada would interrupt and then speak something, and then they read a little more and he'd speak something. So when it came to the Dhira, he said two things. Dhira means one who is undisturbed, even there may be cause for disturbance. He's just explaining what it is, first of all, and then how to get there. So he said it's not something very special if someone remains undisturbed when there's no cause for disturbance. But when there is cause for disturbance and one remains undisturbed, that is Dhira. And then he said to attain the Dhira state, there must be great determination. The determination to take full shelter of Krishna. Then he explained how that great determination can be strengthened. If you want stronger determination, he said, by performing austerities. Because austerities makes the mind stronger, makes the determination stronger. So austerity, it's within the section that we already discussed about penance or tapasya. Austerity doesn't mean reach the threshold where it hurts and just try to go a little bit more. And then that's what you should do. It's not like, the measure is not whether it hurts or not. The measure is placing Krishna first and yourself second. And so that's what we should do. think of ways in which to place Krishna first, reducing our involvement in matter and placing our concern of placing Krishna first. That's our standard of increasing our determination, which then enables us to come to the dhira stage more swiftly.
Next question is from Lavanya Mataji. She asks, kindly help me understand what helps me to develop the attitude of accepting difficulties that come while respectfully paying obeisances to the Lord, thinking everything as Krishna's mercy.
Well, it sounds like the answer is within the question. Meaning, we just practice and cultivate. Like Krishna says, abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamino. We practice, and by practice, that which we're practicing becomes our second nature. By practice, that which we practice becomes our second nature. So, to sustain practice, it requires Krishna consciousness. We're depending on Krishna, not just, I want to get a result consciousness, but depending upon Krishna consciousness. That's how we can sustain a practice. Okay, anything else?
One more question from Lileshwari Mataji. She asks, how do we know when purification comes? How do we recognize it?
Well, simply that your thoughts go to Krishna. Because when one is not purified, one's thoughts go away from Krishna. It's not necessarily related to calamity or difficulty or obstacle. It's just, it can be like when you have a calamity, watch where your mind goes. Or put your hand in your bead bag and watch where your mind goes. Is there purification? Your mind goes to the holy name or it goes somewhere else. Very simple.
And
last one?
Last one. From Sandeep Prabhu, he asks, if one is chanting 16 rounds and following the religious principles, but is not fulfilling the material duties properly and does not experience change in behavior with others, would that still be considered advancing in spiritual life?
It's a foundation. It's not the end, but it's a beginning. So we need the activities of purification to become purified. We need to contact the Supreme Pure to become purified. Until, it's like, the stage before steadiness is unsteadiness. And to get beyond the unsteadiness to steadiness, we need to purify. So continuing these things will help the purification. There may be additional things that we can do, but that's, core or foundational for purification. Recommended standards for purification, accepting them in our life, even if it's dutiful. And I'm not there yet at the steady stage, because I'm not purified yet. You just continue. With the means of purification, we'll become purified. I'm going to end, and I appreciate your continued patience. And we're almost done. We have just 2 more verses. So this evening looks like 6:30. We'll finish 2 verses, 55, 56. 56 is one of the most beautiful. Like Śrī Radhika, you are appreciating the poetry of the Bhagavatam and Brahma Samhita. You're going to go, ooh, when we get to 56. It's